Hello and welcome to Lois and Morgana Davidson Art. Today I'm going to share with you how I painted this simple beginner-friendly watercolour sunset scene with reflections. But just before I get into the demo, I'm really excited to share as well that the book that Morgana and I have been working on, Painting Flowers in Watercolour Techniques and Tutorials for the Complete Beginner, is now available to pre-order. I've left a couple of links in the description below, so why not take a look if you're interested. It comes out later this month in the UK and then later on next year in other parts of the world, but it's available to pre-order now and we're so excited. Right, that's enough of that. Let's get on with today's demo. Today I want to work on beautiful smooth hot press paper so I get a lovely flow of colour across the page. I'm using Saunders Waterford hot pressed watercolour paper. It's taped to my board with ordinary decorator's masking tape and my board is flat on my desk, it's not at a tilt. I've wet the page all over with clean water using a large wash brush, and this is Hansa Yellow Deep, which I've put across the page, across the middle, and then streaking a little of this yellow colour sort of up into the sky and to reflect in the water below. And then either side of the Hansa Yellow, I'm using Pyrrole Red and putting a little of the Pyrrole Red on either side of the yellow. This acts as a sort of a buffer zone so that my blue and yellow don't make green in the sky. And now I can safely put my Windsor blue top and bottom for sky and water, adding a bit of indigo to deepen it across the top and the bottom, safe in the knowledge that I'm not going to get green because I have created a buffer zone with the red. This is my water spray. I'm spraying just a little burst of water to get the paint to flow, because as you can see it looks very streaky and very stripy. Now that I've sprayed it with a bit of water, you can see the paint flowing, and I'm tipping my board from one side to the other just to get these paints to marry and mingle a little, but still retain that sort of horizontal orientation for this very simple sunset. You can see how these three primary colours are working together to create some beautiful sort of violet shades and oranges. But we're still keeping that sort of that gap between the blue and the yellow, so we're not getting green. So I've turned my board right round. I'm adding in a bit more indigo across the top of the sky to deepen it and desaturate that blue a little, and dragging a bit of the indigo into the rest of the sky. And my board is currently at an angle of about 20 to 30 degrees so that this paint is still flowing downwards slightly. Now I can turn the painting back round and I can lay it flat again because I don't want the colours to drift down the page. I'd like them to stay where they are and dry in that sort of position. Because I've used a lot of water, it's very important to remove any excess water with some tissue from the tape, carefully, being careful not to disturb the paint actually on the painting, but remove that water and paint from the tape so it doesn't sort of bleed back into the painting and cause runbacks. Just before everything dries, I'm going to put in a horizon line and a tree line and reflect that into the water. This is really rich, quite a dry mix, dry creamy mix of perylene green, and I'm using my 1.5 inch Mottler brush to create this tree line. The paint is staying where I put it because it's thicker and drier than the drying sky mix, but it is softly diffusing because that sky mix is still damp. It's really important not to introduce really wet paint at this stage, otherwise you'll create runbacks. I'm sweeping some of this colour around the front to create the front of my riverbank in the foreground. Putting a few sort of textural marks because I'm going to be putting in some reeds and grasses in the foreground. And you can see that I've reflected my distant tree line in the water, and I'm using a clean damp flat brush to lift out a water line, just to give the suggestion of where the riverbank ends and where the reflections start. I'm now using a small sword liner to paint in some reeds and grasses, and then I'll work around those marks on either side in the foreground using my palette knife to scrape through the rich paint. I'm now going to take a little bit of fine ground ordinary table salt and sprinkle it into the damp foreground in a few places. This will create little tiny blooms where the salt grains will push away the paint. It's important that the paint isn't too wet or too dry, so wait till the shine has just gone from the paper but before it's completely dry, before you apply your salt. And now leave everything to dry off. As soon as it's completely dry, I can use a clean, dry brush to brush off any remaining salt crystals that didn't dissolve, and you can see how beautifully smooth these washes have worked to give us this really lovely, subtle but simple sunset and reflections in the water. I've mixed up some indigo with a bit of perylene green, and I shall use a little bit of Payne's grey as well, and I'm darkening up around the reeds and grasses in the foreground. I'll continue to do this on both sides and across the middle of the foreground too in places, just to deepen the value and give a little bit more shape and form to the foreground reeds. I added the darks with my size 2 quill brush, and now I've gone back to the sword liner just to add in a few more darker slim reeds here and there. Working around the little salt marks that I created, and then back with the palette knife to work through the paint just in a few places to lift out some pale highlights. I'm really happy with the salt effects. I think the subtle textural difference really is sort of contrasts well against the smooth washes for the water and the sky. And as I add these darks, you can see I'm leaving plenty of the underpainting showing through, and that gives me subtle shifts of colour and tone. I'm now going to remove the tape and see how it looks. I think when you remove the tape and look at it with a clean white border, you can see the painting sort of with fresh eyes. It helps you to sort of see it as a more finished piece, and you can see if anything needs a little bit of work. But I'm quite happy with the way this has turned out. So just time for another quick plug for my first book, Landscapes in Watercolour Techniques and Tutorials for the Complete Beginner. It's available again to purchase from all good bookstores, and I'll leave links in the description below for that, as well as for pre-ordering our latest book on flowers in watercolour. Well, I hope that you enjoyed watching how this simple sunset scene came together. And while it's beginner friendly, it may take a few tries for beginners to get used to handling large washes like this. But remember, use large brushes. Make sure that you use the red as a buffer between the blue and the yellow so that you avoid getting green in your sky. And you can learn an awful lot about water control, which is one of the most important things to learn about watercolour painting. Water control in your paint, in your brushes, and of course on the paper. Many thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please click on the thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed to our channel, why not consider doing so? It's free to do, and it really does help with our reach here on YouTube. And a special shout out to all our wonderful followers on Patreon who help to support this channel. Without you, we couldn't run this free to view YouTube channel. So thank you so much to all of you. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.